my name is Judy and I'm the City Stitcher, and welcome to my Flosstube channel. Today is Sunday, July the 19th, and this is Flosstube number 14. Let's talk Jolly July part 2 and a little more about beading. And really the beading part is for the lovely Gail from Nebraska, who very regularly comments on my videos, which I really appreciate. From last week's episode, she was inspired to go and buy some Mill Hill kits. So I just want to talk a little bit more about kits and my recommendations for someone who hasn't done beading on that. We're going to do that at the end. So let's start off with what I've stitched this week. So no surprise to any of you who have watched my channel before, I have a focus piece this year which I am stitching on regularly, and that is the Marbeck Nativity. So I am working on the bottom part of this center panel, and if you're new to the channel, the Marbeck Nativity is this 5-panel piece. The center panel is actually made up of 2 charts. There's the bottom chart and then there's the top chart. I have not finished the top, but I'm working on the bottom because of how much cry-neck there is in it. So that's what it's supposed to look like. What have I done this week? Well, I've made some really good progress, and this week I'm, really prepared that I actually, unrolled it to the bottom. I need to get my, there we go. Okay. So I've unrolled it to the bottom so that you can see all the way down to where this is finished. So clearly you can tell where Joseph is supposed to go. You can tell where Mary's supposed to go. So the center part of the star is now complete. And I will tell you, I thought I had it completed a couple of days ago. I was coming in, so I had stitched the center part of the star just to the top of where Joseph's head is, because as I said before, that's when I had to start paying attention and start counting to get these shapes and what was going on around them and all that kind of stuff. So I came in and filled in the center all the way down here. Now, I will tell you, I did not do this as charted. So in the chart, it actually changes colors into a darker gold here between Mary and Joseph. Now, I think it looks a little bit weird, and so I ran a little survey this week amongst stitchers that I know that are local, and I have to admit it wasn't close at all. It was unanimous that they would actually not change the color to the darker gold, which was what I was thinking anyway. It struck me as a little bit weird. So that's what I did. I did not change it. I kept it the same color all the way down. I thought I had completed all of this until, about 2 nights ago, where I realized I had forgotten about 8 rows down here. So I finished that up. On this side, so there's three streams of light that are coming down on each side. So on this side, 2 of them are 100% complete. So I just have 1 more left to go. And I left that one out because as I've commented before, I like to have, make sure I keep one where I know exactly where the division is between the top chart and the bottom chart. And so I'm leaving that as this one stream over here. Came over and started on this one. You'll laugh because I discovered that, my stitching slowed down again because I gotten into a really good roll over here because all I had to do was the fill in, no counting, no thought required, all one color, fill in, fill in, fill in for rows upon rows upon rows. So then of course, funnily enough, you get over here to these beams and, it's not fill in and you have to count and they're not the same and all that kind of stuff. So I chuckled because I was like, here we slow down again because, oh my goodness, now I have to count. Anyway, so 2 out of the 3 are complete on this side. This one is coming up close to being complete. It actually goes down a little further than the other side. These beams on the two sides are not identical, so you can't, not that I was thinking that I would necessarily rely on what the other side was doing because it's too far apart for me to tell, but there were a couple of spots, even when I started up here further, that I was like, I thought anyway, they're not identical, so you really do have to pay attention to your counting. So for sure this week, because of course this outer one is the one that is the widest, and then the next two coming in are less. So for sure this week I will get the star completed, and that will feel good. So that's what happened on Marbeck this week. Not to mention I also then had to turn around and say, you know, up until now, this whole time, for however many bajillion weeks we've been talking about Marbeck, I've had the luxury of not paying attention to how many colors are in this thing, because all I was doing was working with the Krynic, and there were like 4 colors of Krynic, which was really easy to keep a handle on. So one of the tasks this week that I did is I actually went upstairs and tried to get all of the DMC that I need for that bottom half of the panel. And I didn't quite get all of it done. I didn't actually end up going through all of the stash to get it. So there's probably about 6 colors that I'm hoping when I go to this other part of the stash I will have. If not, congratulations, I'll have to go out and I'll have to get the missing 6 colors, but I'm thinking I should have them somewhere else. So that's the update on Marbeck. And true to form, so I'm giving myself a little bit of a break, you know, because when you focus on a piece, and I've been focusing on it for a long time, I have to say I'm getting a little bit tired of it. So as usual, I spent one day this week not working on Marbeck, but staying with the Jolly July theme, because I've said that I'm doing Jolly July this year. Same as last week. So this is Nora Corbet's from her series called the Christmas Eve Couriers. This is Vixen. I have to tell you, I always laugh because I look at this and I go like, I don't think that's Vixen. Because with my vast knowledge of Christmas, clearly I easily identify the different reindeer. But anyway, the pattern name is Vixen, even though I don't think this is actually Vixen. Never mind that. Anyway, so where did I get to on that one? So I did get some accomplished. So clearly, as if you remember from last week, I had the back end of the deer done. So I've worked on these reds in the bow. So as noted last week, I will tell you, these are not the called for colors. I darkened them up a little bit because I didn't want them so bright pink as they were in the original chart. So that's what I've done. So it's coming along. Not a ton of progress, but you know, an evening's worth of stitching. And again, you know, the contrast between doing this chart and the Marbeck one, because the Marbeck one is such solid blocks of one color of Krynic, or like, you know, even doing the beams, there's one color. It's just a matter of counting. In this one, like, oh my goodness, like I had to find things and space them out, and you know, this was like actual real counting. Anyway, the other interesting thing is when I sat down to do this, so I'm doing this on a 28 count denim Jobelan, as opposed to the 36 count Edinburgh linen that I'm doing the Marbeck on. I sat down to do this and went, whoo, this is so easy to see, and this is so big. This is great. So that was, I kind of had to laugh at myself going, yeah, the difference between 36 and 28. My usual count that I stitch on is 32, but I'm doing this on 28 for specifically for the color. That was the primary driver. And then for Nora Corbet's, she tends to be a little beady and blingy and sparkly and all those, Mill Hill treasures that get attached. And on a 28 count, you just have a little bit more room to make sure that everything's fitting the way you want it. So that's where I got to on Vixen this week. And then I'm going to talk about a previous finish. Now, full disclosure, yet again, I was looking for this particular thing. I think this cross-stitch company is no longer in business. I haven't been able to find it anywhere. I'm showing it to you anyway. You might be able to find it on a stash unload or something. You may not. So from many, many years ago, actually I'm just looking at the copyright, so it was copyright 2005. So, and again, I got this from a local needle workshop, which has since closed down. So this is from a company called Hob-Nobb Designs. And they had a series of these little things called Doodles. And they were specifically things that were trying to encourage you to use up leftover things in your stash. So it's interesting they don't have it on here. So it came with, in this little case, it came with the chart, and it actually came with a gingerbread man button, which is not on the chart as shown, which now that I'm looking at it is really interesting, but it did actually come with that, and it is part of the chart. And it came with very specific instructions where it said you need a 7 by 7 scrap piece of 14, 16, 28, or 32 count fabric, and then floss, and you needed a red, a yellow, a green, and a white. And I think this was really great for people who are like, I'm not comfortable with changing things and doing all that kind of stuff, because it was like, whatever you've got in your stash that you have available to use, and you don't need a lot of it, this is not a big piece, pick a red that you like that goes with a green, a yellow, and a white. And so I can honestly tell you, I'm really great. I didn't even write down what I used. So when I got this and I was at the store, I actually picked up, so that store, they had like a little basket of weird leftover scrap pieces of fabric of various things. And so I just went over to the basket of leftover fabric and picked up this fabric. So again, it's not going to show up very well. It's actually a really pale mint green, but with some modeling. Now, I wish I had paid attention to what the name of this was, because I actually do kind of like it. And it's one of those ones where you've got the modeling on one side and it is a solid color on the other side. And so there is my piece, the Doodles. So again, really small, really simple to do. Yeah, and just took colors from my stash. I didn't write them down. I didn't pay any attention. And quite frankly, it doesn't matter. Any yellow, red, green, white, you know. And you can do this with, I'm calling it most ornament charts. And we talked about this a little bit before on, you know, when I was doing the Shepherd's Bush. And it was interesting. I was watching somebody else this week on Flosstube, and they were talking about, I don't even remember the designer or what the chart was, and they were talking about, you know, that they're very careful about kitting stuff up, that they don't, you know, there are sites that are really great where they're like, here's the chart and here's exactly what the chart calls for in terms of floss. You can just add all of that to cart, makes it really simple. But for the ones that use the fancy floss, so the overdyes, whether it's Weeks or Gentle Arts or Classic Colorworks or Rumie's Creations or Silks or whatever, you know, again, as I went through the Shepherd's Bush Summer Notes one, I had gone through that and looked at the chart and went, you know what, for you know, even though it called for an over dyed, given the size of the stitching area that I was going to be working on, there weren't enough stitches there that you'd actually be able to see the variegation. And so this other floss tuber was commenting on that as well, where, you know, she's careful. It's not that she's opposed to using it, but she's like, I always like to look at my chart before I make those decisions. And so she was looking at this one, and, you know, one of the colors, the over dyed colors that was on there, was used for, I think, like 4 or 6 stitches purely to stitch the legs on like a bird or something like that. And she was like going, there's no way I'm spending my money on getting that over dyed floss to do 6 stitches to make some bird's legs. I'm just not doing it, which is totally fine. If you want to do it, that's great. These are everybody's, it's your hobby. Do what makes you happy. If you want to use everything as called for, go for it. If you don't want to use any of the called for it, go for it. Make sure you're getting enjoyment out of your stitching. But I always laugh because I am there in the camp saying, if you're and don't get me wrong, I like that the designers are trying to support the thread companies, have no issues with that. But I do go, sometimes, you know, you don't really need to use an over dyed floss for everything in your chart. I think over dyed floss is fantastic when you're going to be able to see the variegation. I think that's a great way of accomplishing it. But hence, you know, but that's me. And if you want to use all the variegateds for everything, knock yourselves out. If you want to convert everything from DMC floss to over dyed silks, and that's what you want to do, great, do that as well. But I just had a chuckle this week where I'm like going, oh my goodness, there were like 6 stitches and there's no way I'm using an over dyed floss for that. And I'm like, I hear ya, that's me too. Anyway, so this is a previous finish. Sadly, I don't think, you might be able to find some of these doodles on a stash unload or who knows where, maybe on eBay or something like that. I did do some pretty decent canvassing to see if I could find any on any of the stitching sites where you could order online, and couldn't find any, but I did enjoy it. I still, you know, congratulations. Welcome to my world. I think I've been very clear. I'm really good about finishing the stitching and then just putting them in a bag in the closet and going and not getting them. One of these years, maybe I'll have a goal that I will actually fully finish things. So that's my doodles, Christmas related. I still like it. I really should do something with this and finish it off. Check back, I don't know how long from now, to see if that gets accomplished. Okay, let's talk about free charts before we get into the beading thingy. You know I like a good free chart, and I like to highlight them because I'm also in the camp of download it while you can find it, because you just never know. So Priscilla and Chelsea of Stitching with the Housewives released a free chart on her web page, not in her Etsy store, but on her web page. I will put a link to that in the notes below, called Blessed. So she likes her sunflowers, and so I like the concept of this. There's no way I'm doing the flowers in yellow. So I will change them to something else, which will mean that they don't look necessarily like sunflowers, which means I will then also need to probably change the size of the center of the flower. You know, but it's round, just bring it in a couple of stitches, it'll all be fine. When am I stitching this? Nobody knows. Now, they've stitched this on black, but you can stitch it on whatever you want. The only thing that I would say when you're making those decisions is when you're choosing your color for Blessed, just make sure that you choose a color that you can see on your fabric choice that you like, and then make the flower whatever color you want. You know, these 2 little ones on the sides, I think they will be fine regardless. It's just the center sunflower that if you're choosing a different color, you may need to sort of bring that in 1 or 2 stitches just to make it look more like the flower that you're trying to replicate. So that's the new chart, free chart from her. She also, this was last year, towards Christmas, And since we're talking about Jolly July, so I'm going to show the one that they released last year called Chicken Joy. So I will link this also in the notes below. Now, there's a lot of things you can do with this. So, you know, if you don't like chickens, and quite frankly, it's not that I'm opposed to chickens, but I don't generally enjoy stitching chickens. So, you know, I've seen people where all they've done is just the tree. That really makes a nice little ornament. I've seen ones where they've stitched the tree and they've taken the letters for joy and just done them vertically as opposed to horizontally to fill in the space. That works too. I've seen ones where they've done the tree and then they've used an alphabet and done the name of a relative that they were gifting it, the ornament to. So, you know, I've seen ones where they've changed the chicken to a dog or a cat or a something. You know, change it to whatever works for you. It makes you happy. So that's Chicken Joy. Again, a free chart from Priscilla and Chelsea, and I will link that in the show notes below as well. So those are the free charts. I'm just going to talk a little bit about a chart that I talked about before. So I have already purchased this. This is one of the Tempting Tangles stitch alongs where the parts come out. I think it's every 2 weeks. There's 16 parts to it. Have I started stitching this? Of course not, because I don't do well with the mystery. I like the concept. I bought the chart because there was enough of it shown that I was enjoying it, but there's no way I could remotely start stitching on it until I see the whole thing, because, you know, I may have to change things and colors, and until I see what everything's going on, I can't make some of those decisions. So this is the Tempting Tangle Stitch Along Quakers in Scotland. It's very Scottish. I do have Scottish heritage, and so I just thought I would give you a little bit of an update as to where that stitch along is and the parts that have been released. So this is up to part 10. So it's got all sorts of things that I like in it, and I like the colors in it. Bagpipes, crowns, you know, a gigantic boat. There's a castle that's coming through here. Clearly we're going to have some sword things going on over here. Yes, one of these days I will stitch this. Don't know when. Not important. Got the chart while it's very reasonably priced as a stitch along. Because don't forget, once the stitch along is done, there will be a time lag between when this chart potentially becomes available again, and I will guarantee you that there will be a price differential. So if you like this at all, my recommendation is go buy the sal now, which is generally what I do. I'm really good about buying the sals. Don't know when I'm going to start stitching this. But yes, somebody posted this and I went, oh, this is just coming along lovely. Again, so there's about 6 more. So there's 2 more ports over here and then 1 more row. And then the whole thing will be released. So that's Tempting Tangles, Quakers in Scotland. Now, let's talk bead kits. Gail, we need to talk. So Gail had put in her comment on last week's video, and again, thank you so much, Gail, for regularly commenting. I do appreciate the comments. And to everyone else, feel free to comment, leave questions, comments, all sorts of things. More than happy to get that. So Gail had commented that she had been inspired by last week's video to go out and buy some Mill Hill kits, because that's what we talked about last week, and that she had never tried beading. So I thought, when she said that, I went, I should probably pay attention to what the kit actually says versus what I do, because sometimes those are not the same. And I looked at them and I went, they're not the same. I should probably make a couple of comments. So I had commented last week, you know, that some of the kits, most of the kits I would say that you get from Mill Hill come with perforated paper to stitch them on, and some of the kits, to a large extent, much less, come with fabric. If you've bought a kit that has the perforated paper, Here's my caution. Here's a couple of things where I would say to you to, hey, it's your project, do what you want. These are just things that I would say, maybe think about these things. So in all of these kits, they do say do all of the cross stitches first. So do all the regular cross stitches with the floss before you start adding any of the beads or treasures or anything else that comes in the kit. And that's exactly what I would say. If you are unsure about your comfortability about attaching the beads and what they're going to look like, I would say before you start applying them to your project on the perforated paper, take a few of the beads, 3, 5, 7, 8, something like that, and practice stitching them on a random piece of fabric that you've got. They're easy, you don't have to finish your thread off or any of that kind of stuff. You can just actually try applying them onto fabric, because I find the fabric is much more forgiving. If you apply it onto the perforated paper and you're unhappy and you have to frog the beads off, the paper doesn't necessarily hold up as well. So I'd say take a few of them, practice attaching them onto a piece of fabric. You'll be able to get them off no problem, and then you can reattach them. And in the Mill Hill kits, if you lose 3, 5, 7 beads, I would still say don't worry about it. There's lots of beads in there. They've given you more than enough to do your project. You're going to be fine. So then I looked at the instructions for how to attach the beads, and I do see this come up in the Facebook groups somewhat regularly where somebody's doing it. I, of course, do not attach my beads the way that they tell you to attach the beads in the Mill Hill kit instructions. So I thought I would talk a little bit about that and why I do what I do. For any of you that are doing them, any beading that you do, don't forget your project, do what makes you happy, apply them to the project so that you like the effect. That's all that matters, is that you're happy with your project, period, full stop. Doesn't matter what anybody else says, doesn't matter what anybody else tells you is the right way or the correct way or the proper way to attach them. None of that's relevant. Your project, do what makes you happy. So, because that's certainly what I do. So in the instructions to the Mill Hill kit, they tell you to apply the beads by using a half stitch, and essentially they show you the bottom leg of the cross stitch, assuming that your bottom leg of a cross stitch goes from bottom left to top right. And what that does when you attach a bead that way is the bead lies at an angle on a little bit of a diagonal. And so the direction of the diagonal depends on which half of the cross stitch you're doing it. It lays in one way if you're doing it with the half stitch where it's bottom left to top right. It lies in the opposite diagonal if you're doing it from the one that goes from top left to bottom right. Now, I generally don't like putting my beads on so that they lie in a diagonal. And the reason why I do that is because generally in the patterns, there is a space that is generally the space of a regular cross stitch for that bead. And for me, when you apply the beads and they are lying on a diagonal, you can see the fabric behind it. And that's not my preference. I prefer that it lies straight on there and generally fills up the space that would have been taken by a full cross stitch. So when I apply my beads to my projects, and I would say this is 98% of them, I apply my beads with one strand of floss. Generally, if I'm doing something that's really beady, I actually do use 9mo or the invisible beading thread. I don't have a problem. Not everybody likes that. It doesn't come in the Mill Hill kits. That's just my preference. But I apply them with a full cross because I want the beads to lie straight up and down and fill in that spot. So, for example, we're going to get really up close. So I've hauled this same Mill Hill kit back out. I don't know if this is going to show up very well. So these candy canes here, it's hard to tell, white beads with red back stitching. And I'm going to bring it in really close here. Hopefully, I might have to cover up my face so it focuses. So you can see that I've done that those beads are generally being vertical, that they're not really on a diagonal at all. And again, I've done that deliberately because I like the beads to fill up the space. The interesting thing is in the instructions, because there are larger beads, these gold, red, you know, there are some larger beads on there. For those ones, the instructions do say use a full cross. But my answer is I use a full cross for all of them because that's how that's how I like my beads to sit. And again, that is a preference. So if you like your beads on a diagonal and that works best for you, fantastic. Do that. If you're new to beading, again, I would say take that little bit of fabric, apply your beads, see what you like. And the other part is, depending on the kit that you've bought and what the design is, it's okay to say, for some designs I like them to be on a diagonal and some designs I like them to be straight up and down. That's okay too. It's your project. Do what makes you happy. Do what fits the project. Make it so that it looks the way you want it to look. That's all that's important. So that's just a couple of things, Gail, for you. So when you get your kits, since it's your first time beading, I thought I would talk about this, because if you follow the instructions in the kit says to apply them in, with that half cross stitch, which will lead your bead to be on a diagonal. Your choice. Again, for me, I don't like them on the diagonal, but that's my preference. The time, so I said about 98% of the time, so it's not to say that I would never put it on a diagonal. So why would, at sometimes would I put it on a diagonal? So it depends on if I feel that there's so many beads that we're having a crowding issue. So sometimes you can fix a crowding issue by just, not applying a bead. Depends on the project. If you're having a crowding issue with the beads, like there's a lot in a row and you're having difficulty making them fit, that can be an opportunity where having them attaching them on the diagonal does make them fit a little bit better. If you're having that crowding issue, again, that's specific to whatever that particular project is, and you'll have to make an assessment based on that particular project and what's going on as to what the best solution is to get your beads on your project. So that comes to the end of this week's episode. I'm just gonna haul up my doodles here one more time, because not surprisingly, as you all know, every week I try to have a different, so I'm just gonna do one more. We're having that weird lighting effect. There's my previous Christmas finish with the gingerbread button on it. Yeah, I like this. One of these days I really should get this pulled off and get it finished. So that's it for this week. I hope everybody's had a good, productive stitching week, and I hope everybody's healthy and everyone in their family is doing well. So I hope you have a good week next week, and I hope that you'll come back and visit again next week. For the last week of Jolly July, I've already planned out what my previous finish is that I'm going to show, because I do like that one. It's fun. I like it. You'll come back and check out next week. So I hope everybody has a good week, and I look forward to seeing you next week on my next Flosstube. Thanks for coming.